Doug, somebody writes in to ask this. In a recent All of Christ for All of Life podcast, you talked about covenantal cause and effect. This was something I had never heard of before. I've been talking with my wife about why I think I've never heard this concept taught in my 40 years at church. I'm wondering if you have thoughts about why it isn't taught. And you probably just, for everybody listening, maybe need to just really quickly remind us what covenantal cause and effect, how you defined that.
Yeah, covenantal cause and effect has to do with the reality and nature of lesser covenants. I'm not talking about the new covenant or the covenant of grace, although what's going on there informs what's going on in a marriage covenant and so on. But I believe this is referring to what I said about households and covenants within households. So, for example, I first was put onto it by Job's comments when in the first part of Job, where when after his children had had a feast, Job would go out and sacrifice for his children. And he would do so because it may be that they cursed God in their hearts. Now, that's a father taking responsibility for the covenantal faithfulness of his children. And we live in a time, well, no, don't blame me. He's 18. I'm responsible for me, and he's responsible for him. Part of the difficulty is, I just read a comment by Thomas Sowell, which is we're rapidly getting to the point where nobody is responsible for what they do, but everybody is responsible for what somebody else does. Right, where we blame societal ills and whatever, and what that is the result of muddling up the relationship of personal responsibility to corporate responsibility. Well, every corporate body has a head, a covenant head. In the family, it's the husband and the father. And so for an example would be if a father is secretly using pornography, he can't be surprised when he catches his teenage son doing the same thing. And it's different than the son seeing his father smoking, and so the son smokes.
Right.
What the father was doing was in secret. But what he was doing was giving covenantal permission. In our household, we can live like this.
It's a spiritual reality.
I think it's a spiritual reality. We leave all these doors unlocked around here. And so consequently, getting to the point of this question, the reason I think it isn't taught is that it radically lays strict responsibility and accountability on covenant heads to stand up straight and take responsibility. So in another realm, a related realm, I define masculinity as the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. And I think that that's what covenant leadership is. Covenant leadership requires masculine leadership, and masculine leadership is the glad assumption of sacrificial responsibility. Don't blame me, he's an adult, or don't blame me, he's too young. And he's too young, he's too old, I'm never responsible. That evasiveness is the thing that I think is killing us. So, and I think the reason you rarely hear about this is that everybody say, oh, who could, this is a hard teaching, who can bear it?
It seems like, I know growing up, running into the requirement of ministers for having believing children, that was the one that struck me as, it seemed to me straight out of the weird verses in Leviticus about what kind of cloth you can have in your sweater. I mean, so I had, growing up evangelical, there were verses that I just had, I assumed that those had no application, and that seemed to be in that category. And purely because of all of the pastors that I knew, because a pastor's kid was notorious always for being the greatest hellion.
PK kids and MK, missionary kids, the same. They feel like they've got something to prove. But Paul is very pointed. He says, if you can't manage your household, how can you manage the household of God? How can you labor covenantally in a local congregation if you don't know how to labor covenantally in the household? Now, I said a minute ago that this is a hard teaching, who can bear it? Well, it's a hard teaching as long as you're looking at it from the outside. When you take responsibility, when you say, yes, Lord, teach me how to do this, and you take it on yourself, the Lord's words are true. His yoke is easy, his burden is light. So a lot of these things, taking responsibility, makes a whole lot more sense from within
Mm-hmm.
than it does looking at it from outside. From outside, it looks really pretty scary.
Yeah.
From inside, you discover, oh,
Yeah.
this is the cockpit. This is where the levers are. This is where this is where the instrument panel is.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of trying to fly the plane clutching to the nose of it.
Right. Well, I wonder. I mean, the specific question. Why is it that this man has never heard this in 40 years at church? And I wonder if it has a lot to do with the people at the microphone are the ones who are most hit by it.
Yeah.
Have the most repenting to do. Are the ones that are going to be most.
Yeah, the people doing
guilty.
the teaching. How are you going to listen to a sermon on how to manage your household well
Mm-hmm.
from a man everybody in the church knows didn't?
Mm-hmm.